judgment can be this real bug, this real virus, this real rotting thing amongst the calling that you're meant to be pursuing in your life. And if you aren't aware of how judgment works, and specifically how it's been hindering you in your life, what can end up happening is it can completely distort the proper calling, the proper career path, the proper place to walk for you and your life's work. And I started to notice this time and time again because if you don't know who I am, my name is Joel Yulee, and I'm a philosopher, and I work with hundreds of different students from all around the world to know their path and get into contact with it by unearthing their career archetype. And I typically work with spiritual and creative individuals. And what ends up going on sometimes, especially in the beginning days, the dark days, when you're really trying to figure out what it is that your path is that as you're trying to get in tune with it, a lot of noise, a lot of other people's opinions start to infiltrate the call, meaning that you can't quite hear it properly. And when you start to lean too much into other people's opinions, they start to corner you. And they corner you in such a way that it begins to take on this reverse transformation. You start to go through a reverse transformation, meaning you start to walk a path that is antithetical to the path that you're actually meant to be walking. And you start to cocoon yourself into this reverse transformation where you start to, I guess you grow wings, but if you were to name those wings, one would be decay and one would be belittlement, meaning that you're in no state to fly. You're hindered and you're grounded and you're unable to begin to move higher towards your exalted form. And this is not the place to be, and this is not the way to live, and this is not how you want to begin to move. And in this video, I really wanted to begin exploring this idea of a judgment so that you can, one, begin to reframe it, but two, begin to understand how much of a poison it can be. And this poison is often administered by those that we care most about. So many different parents are giving their children this poison. If you are somebody that is an entrepreneur, a creative, somebody in the spiritual spaces, somebody that is a healer, you might have heard your parents or those close to you and who have said to love you when you've told them, hey, I want to pursue this particular path, that, oh, you can't actually make money from doing that, or that has no stability, or wouldn't you prefer to do, and then insert the career path that is more acceptable to the norm. And having to deal with these counter arguments when your connection to soul says, hey, I actually need to pursue something different, can be incredibly harmful and can hurt you, and can hurt you in such a way that you don't ever want to actually go and pursue the path because you're worried that those that are close to you will in some way abandon, reject, or throw you out like an outcast. And you might not think that logically, but physically or emotionally, just really viscerally, you start to get this feeling that, oh, if I pursue this other path, I'm actually going to get thrown out of here. So I better not. I better stay quiet. I better stay little. I better stay safe. And yet that is the very opposite of what is required as you walk a calling that you're meant to be walking. And it's quite sad that those closest to us can often be the ones that are hindering us from our growth. And so what's the solution? How do we move past this? Well, if you think about your calling, probably one of the best metaphors that I can think about is if you think about an old radio player, in a car, and it's got the red marking, and that red marking is controlled by a dial. And so you're playing with that dial, and as you're playing with that dial to find the right station, you're just hearing static, you're hearing noise, you can't hear anything, you just got that like going on in the radio. And then you start to move it, and then all of a sudden you hear a voice or you hear a song. And as you start to hear that voice, you're like, oh, there's a voice going on. And then you start to move it and you kind of go past it, and then you lose it and you got to go back and tap back into it. And then finally you hear this clear, crisp, clean sound coming through the station. And as you hear that, then you can realize and you can know, oh, okay, this is at the right frequency. There's a match here. There's a match between what I'm hearing and sort of like the signal that's going out, meaning that you're hearing signal as opposed to noise. When it comes to judgments, when it comes to people saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, that's static. That's not real. That's not the thing that you need to be listening to when it comes to your calling. When it comes to your calling, you need to be listening to the signal. If you're not listening to the signal, what ends up going on is that means that you're just attuned to judgments. You're orientated towards the external, as opposed to having an anchor point within yourself that says, hey, this is the ground that we need to root into. This is where we can actually launch from and move towards our highest state of being. And, these opinions and these judgments can come from anywhere. It's not just our parents that are on blast here. It's not just your cousin or your uncle who made fun of you at some sort of dinner because you mentioned the fact that you were exploring a spiritual domain, or you're exploring your music and you wanted to actually become a musician. And just because your uncle couldn't do it, doesn't mean that you can't do it. I mean, this is just their bullshit coming in and infiltrating your life. And so you have to connect in once again with that signal. These opinions can come from, maybe it's a 9-to-5 job that you're at. You're at a 9-to-5 job. You have a team leader named Sally and you're in a call center. And Sally's opinion might matter to you way more than you think, to the point where, say, for example, you wanted to put yourself out on social media and you couldn't because what happens if this gets back to Sally? And when you start to think about it in this way, it can sound quite silly. I mean, if you start to zoom out and you start to get some real perspective on this, like imagine yourself on your deathbed. You're lying on your deathbed, you're having your final thoughts, you're going over the rest of your life. I don't think you're going to think to yourself, I'm so glad I didn't take that risk. I'm so glad I didn't go for it because Sally thinks that I did okay, because Sally is pleased in some way about my little safe life. I mean, this is, once again, it's no way to live. And so you have to go beyond the opinions of others and really get in tune with you yourself and your own signal point. And that has to matter to you. What actually is interesting is that when you start to really look at how other people's opinions are governing your behavior, you start to reflect and realize that they're governing you way too much, to the point where you're unable to properly act and be in the world. So in saying this, I would like to give you a reframe on how to look at judgment so that you can begin to overcome it and move through it so that you're not chained to the wall based on other people's opinions. And so this reframe has two parts. So the first part is that you want to start to put yourself as the judge, meaning that humans naturally judge other people. It's very hard to get to a place where you are not judging others and you're also not judging yourself. So rather than go and say, hey, don't judge anyone and be this sort of transcendent being that is at this point in their life where they're not judging anyone, we say, okay, you do judge people. However, you're the person that is the primary judge of yourself. If so-and-so has an opinion, if someone else comes to you and says that, hey, you shouldn't actually be pursuing this path, or like, why are you pursuing this path? That's lame. If they say something like that, that's their opinion, that's their judgment. But how do you feel about doing that? How do you judge yourself because you had the courage to go out there and express yourself in a different way? And so just because they can't, just because they've been the same since high school, doesn't mean that you have to lower yourself to that level. So the reframe is simple. Put yourself as the judge. You are the person that judges yourself first and foremost, prior to any other opinions. It doesn't matter how close they are to you. Parents, partners, friends, even these, collective no-name followings. People have these different social media followings nowadays where they will bend to the following to be judged by them because they are being judged by them, but they will hold them over themselves. And especially if you're somebody that is creatively inclined, you'll need to go through different transformations to properly explore not only your path, but who you are as an individual. And if you always just bend to the group that you're serving, you're not actually serving them properly. So the second part of this reframe is to understand that the people that need you, the people that you're born to serve, the work that you're meant to create that is meant to connect with someone else, somebody else views art, somebody else listens to your music. The work that you bring forth into the world has an other side, and their judgment matters much more than people that are holding you back to the judgment of a past self or an old self. What often happens, especially if you're going through a career transition or a career transformation, is that people have this built identity of who you are and how you act. And the moment you start to break out of this, the moment you start to push on the walls of who that person is and how that person behaves in the world, people will start to push and prod you back into that version of yourself. They'll start to push you back into the cocoon when you're trying to become something else. And you have to be aware of this, and you have to allow the opinions and the judgments of those people who see the new version of you rather than the people who are holding you to an older version of yourself. And this just comes with a clear understanding of what your signal is, meaning that, like I said, opinions and judgments are noise. And you always want to go back to your own personal inner signal of where you're meant to be going. And when people's judgments agree with that signal, it can help you to boost forward. It can help with momentum. It can help to light more of a fire toward the pursuit that you're meant to be going in. But when they don't connect with that signal, which also means that you have to know what your signal is, but when they don't connect with your signal, then it's just a matter of saying, okay, that doesn't connect with you, but it connects with all these other people, and these are the people that really matter, and these are the people that I'm trying to serve. And so long as you continue to do that, then you'll be able to move towards your exalted form, and you won't continually think, oh, am I meant to be pursuing this path? Is this really the right thing for me? There's no distortion there because you're clear on what it is that you're meant to be doing. And once you're clear, then you can hear the signal, you can hear the sound, and then it's just about just following the music. And if you're interested in learning more about how I help people to choose and know the right career path, then you can go ahead and check the Unearth membership, where I help people to unearth their career archetype and know their path underneath this video. And if you'd like to talk to me one-on-one about how I help people to unearth their career archetype, you can also book a discovery call under the video.